This is fun, dude.
Oh, yeah.
Hey everyone, we're just here on Synergy Podcast. I'm here with my brother Tyler.
What's up?
We're just stepping into this, doing our first episode together, learning as we go. And today we're going to be talking more about ADHD. We both have ADHD, and Tyler's learned a lot about ADHD from a lot of different books, and we'll be going more into that on different episodes. But today we're just kind of getting started with that, and we can really start anywhere you want. But what are some of the things you wanted to share today?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things that we could go into about ADHD, but for me specifically, I think, and my friends would laugh when I say this, but it's mainly like having timed blindness. I feel like I'm so immersed in the now a lot of times that I would always be late and things would always take so much longer than I thought. And then all of a sudden I'm like 30 minutes late to where my friends would just joke, like, we need to tell this kid to come like early. So that's just one example, but that was kind of one of the first things I wanted to talk about a little bit more.
Yeah, I naturally can relate to that so much. And even today, we were talking about ways to go about this, and I thought about how, okay, let's try to do like 20 things, and it's like, okay, let's back off just a little bit. Like we can accomplish all that in our Ferrari brain in a second, but not in real life. And
yeah.
How have you navigated that in your life?
Yeah, I mean, and first of all, I don't think it's necessarily bad. I think ADHD can be your superpower. It's more just being aware and learning how to navigate it, like you said. So like wanting to do a lot of things, having a lot of hobbies, it's great. But for some scenarios, learning to navigate it, like you said, is important. Like, for example, work, like if I'm always late, I'm going to get fired. And so I think it's just kind of learning to it's great to be in the now, but learning to slow down a little bit enough to prepare a little bit for the future, and just learning as you go systems and things that'll make it easier to be on time. So for example, for me at work, I have to wake up an hour before I need to leave my house just to be on time. And that seems ridiculous, but somehow every morning I still am leaving past when I'm supposed to be. And so that's just kind of one example of you learn as you go, but usually just giving yourself a little bit more time than you think is the first step for me.
Yeah, that sounds like a really effective strategy, because another thing that it might lead into is this idea of beating yourself up for that. Because I remember one time trying to go to bed earlier on this regular basis, and somehow, same thing you're describing in the morning, how does it take this long to somehow get in bed? I don't even understand myself. And I know for me, sometimes that's led to a harsh inner critic of why can't you just do it the way mentally it would make sense? And do you ever experience that?
I experience that a lot, and especially in the past, and I think that that's normal, for maybe just based on our subconscious minds or the way we've been raised. I think people with ADHD too are more sensitive to that. And so although that's good, I think that part of us is trying to help us be better. I think it's also helpful to learn to be more loving towards yourself overall, and just be there's days where even after I said that, I'm still late to work sometimes, I'm still late with my friends. So it's more just learning to see these things and get better as you go, but I'm definitely not perfect. And so I think it's realizing even though I'm going to be late sometimes, even though I probably won't go to bed on time all the time, and it doesn't make sense logically, to just try to give yourself that love and that grace. And I think that's hard to do, but that just comes with practice. And so I think that's one healthy habit, I guess I would call, of trying to manage yourself with ADHD, is just learning to, what I've done is try to give myself 10 to 20 minutes a day. And sure, I'll miss days, but that's just a general idea of meditation, or even giving yourself space to just rest, or even give yourself love, feel love, breathing exercises. There's a lot of different ways I do it, but I think it goes back to that of helping those parts of you know that like I still love all of me, but I don't need to be like negative, if that makes sense. But I think it's normal to feel that way though.
Yeah, well, that's good. What have you noticed as, like, I would imagine when you say that, that you haven't always given yourself that love or that space to meditate. And what have you noticed shift within your experience, maybe pre doing those kind of things you mentioned versus present day?
Yeah, I think that's a good question, and I think that's what I like about your program. Learning to be mindful is like a day-to-day process, so each day could be different. Like it's kind of based on the state of my body and mind. Maybe some days I'm just feeling great, and it's easier when you're feeling great to, not be hard on yourself. But I think if I'm tired, hungry, things aren't going the way I thought, it's a lot easier to be negative. And so I think that's where it's okay, but that's where I think it comes with consistency, really. So that's where trying to do it daily is important, because then you're over time, over years. I think it's been maybe four years since I started getting more into this, where it's like it becomes just more of a habit. Because then I think on those days where it's harder, I can still go back to that habit, and even if I don't have the best day, then I can come back tomorrow, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think that's another thing that I think you mentioned before, that might be in Atomic Habits, but this idea of you're not gonna hit it 100% every day, but if you kind of have this system in place and the self-love over like that time period, 4 years, you've progressed a ton. Even though like on a single day you might say like, well, today was harder. Like today I didn't necessarily remember to do all those things, or I was harder on myself maybe.
Yeah, that's a great book. I love Atomic Habits. I think everyone should read it, even people that don't have ADHD. But yeah, I think that's where it just all can come together, like on the hard days, and you'll miss days, but then that's, I guess, where like those habits and those systems you create can help bring you back. But that kind of like what you said, I think that's where the self-love is so critical, because like think about, I don't know if it's the same for you or for everybody, but I feel like people with ADHD are hypersensitive. And so you can be hypersensitive to like any emotion, but especially like criticism. And so sometimes it's like, obviously a lot of this stuff is like in your subconscious, so it doesn't make sense logically. But if you try to think about it logically, it's like, if everyone else around you makes you feel that way more easily, then it doesn't make sense to be so negative to yourself, because you're almost just like amplifying what you feel externally.
Yeah, and like a double layer.
Yeah. And so it's like if everyone else around you is almost making you more easily feel like hypersensitive, then I think it's even more critical to be like, I need to be more loving to myself. Like even if I think I don't deserve it, I think that's where like that unconditional self-regard is important. Like don't base it on external. Like even on the days that I'm late to work, or the days like you said when you can't sleep, I think those are the days to learn from, because it's like if I'm only loving myself when I get to work on time, or if I go to bed on time, that's basing it on like external conditions. So those are the times to learn, I guess. Like the times when I'm not doing it, to be like, and I'm sure I'll go there first, and like that might be like the initial like, oh, I'm such an idiot. But I think if you take a step back and be like, no, it's okay, like this is gonna happen, like I still love myself, and I'm gonna like come back tomorrow. I think that's huge.
Yeah, I think so too. It just reminds me of, one book that we've both, since we share the same Audible account, one book that comes to mind with the self-love principle is Gabor Mate's Scattered Minds book. And just sort of as a contrast point, I think you also listened to that Healing ADD by Daniel Amen book. And Healing ADD, I found that before Scattered Minds, and for me that was like validating that it was even real. It talks about brain imaging and people with ADHD trying to do a task that makes them like bored, and the more they tried to do it, the more their brain, like the same region, would like turn off instead of like quote unquote normal people. And so that was more like, okay, this is real. Whereas Gabor Mate's book was more for me like kind of what you've been saying about the self-love. Like there's this deeper sensitivity piece that I didn't really notice like to the degree you seem to be expressing it until I saw it in Ben, my 7-year-old. he can just go from I'm fine to like one thing like that where you can tell he feels like maybe he did it wrong or he's like ashamed or embarrassed, and he's on the other end of the spectrum. And watching him do that, I kind of realized, that's how it is inside for me, like that super tough. Like, and so it really stands out to me what you said about the wave against the wave, like doing that back to yourself. And I guess me bringing up those books, does that bring up any other thoughts for you about either of those? Or
Yeah, I think those are both great books, and I like what you said there. And I think one thing that's cool about you helping me there and you learning those things, being a PA, was I wasn't even sure either, like necessarily what it was, like ADHD, things like that. And so I think learning about it is helpful, because then people can realize like it's not that there's nothing wrong with me or you or anyone with any kind of condition. So I think that's what learning about it is helpful, because it's like, oh yeah, this is actually a normal function of the brain and like certain symptoms. But then learning how to like effectively deal with it is important too, in a way, or like how to self-parent yourself. Kind of when you talked about Gabor Mate's book, his book is like really in depth about that, like each person just learning to almost like think of yourself like how you see it in Ben, seeing that in yourself. Like there's all these parts of me that might still kind of be like a 7-year-old in a way. And so kind of giving them that love and that space to grow, I think is really critical.
Yeah, that feels really powerful. And it just reminded me when you were saying that, or I guess it created the curiosity in me of, if you go back to like before you ever learned you had ADHD, how has just learning about it affected you compared to what your life was like, before you had a word like ADHD to match the symptoms?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's helpful now just because I'm more busy, like now that I'm working a full-time job and I have a girlfriend and things like that. It's just to learn more about the mindfulness side, I think, and like making habits, because before I knew about it really, I just basically just exercise. Like getting into exercise and flow state, I think is super important for anybody, but I think especially for me, and I've heard that before in books and on podcasts about even people with ADHD, it really is like critical to get enough exercise, especially flow state activities. So for me, snowboarding, trail running, things like that, traveling, taking pictures, like I would always just feel like I had tapped into like a higher version of myself, because I was just like so immersed in my reality that I wasn't worried about anything else, like any of the other noise.
That makes
and
sense.
So it could be different for everyone, but I like usually feel so much better after going for a run or like, snowboarding some powder. So I think it mainly was just, doing those things as much as possible. But like in this world with school and work and, stuff that people have, I think that's where learning the other tools are important, because ideally, if I could do that stuff every day, I probably would just only do that. But
We'd probably be skiing every day.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I feel the same way, in that when I am not able to not only exercise, but I like how you mentioned some of these deeper flow activities, like even for you, photography, really just being able to get so deep into something you're passionate about or you really enjoy, compared to just day-to-day life. There's a lot more of like have to, like should. I guess that's a topic I'm curious about, as what do you notice in your life that, like, in terms of how it feels when this comes up with ADHD, a lot of self-directed activities versus like imposed activities, if that makes sense? Like,
yeah, that makes sense. So I think having ADHD isn't necessarily like that you can't focus. I think it's more just like the brain, at least kind of the way they described it in those two books we were talking about earlier, would almost be like there's so much going on at once and like the traffic light isn't working. So it's like your prefrontal cortex isn't regulating everything enough. And so it's almost like not getting enough like direction like especially for more boring activities, so it's harder to get like that stimulus. But I think with activities that people that you love, like for me snowboarding or like even photography, you can get hyper focused still. So people can still focus. It just, I think it's a lot easier to turn on for the things that you love. So to go back to your question, I think it still is hard, and it could be hard for anybody, even people without ADHD, to focus on boring things. But I think that's where, like, I guess just seeing what's possible, kind of give yourself some grace. Like for anyone who thinks they can't focus, then just remember like, oh, but how hyper focused was I for like 8 hours straight when it was a good powder day? And so it kind of shows you that what's possible, I guess. And then I think it just kind of can go back with the habits and like learning, kind of what I was saying before, giving yourself enough time or just setting things up in a way to help you be more successful. And then I think it just comes with like discipline, but it still may not always be like easy, I guess, to focus on something more boring.
And I like what you said about the traffic light. It makes me think about like an analogy with computers of like having like 50 tabs open sometimes in a lot of settings versus getting into like a flow state, doing something you really love and sort of narrowing down to the one thing you really love. And I've definitely learned in my life, you know, since synergy, like following my passions, there's just this seems to be endless energy and focus. Whereas I used to really, like as an example, when I used to backcountry ski a lot, I put in just an immense amount of energy and effort into it, but it never really felt forced. It didn't feel like hard. Like the energy and motivation to do it was always there. And I would often think, well, how do I bottle that up and like put that into all these other categories? And part of my own learning journey was like, the disconnect is like when I feel like I have to force myself to do something, it almost like paralyzes me and seems like paralyze that system. Whereas when I'm empowered to follow my passions and true desires, it's like, I could focus forever. Like the hyper focus you talked about.
So, and that's super cool. So I think that's where obviously everyone's a little bit different, but ideally if you can find something you're good at and something you like, then you're already going to have more energy and motivation to go towards that. It's just going to be easier, like skiing or just even things you like with more creativity. And so I think, but I also think just doing those, even if it's not like your main job, like for me, it's not my main job necessarily, like at least right now, like my absolute passion. I think I have a lot of things that I've learned and good skills for my job, but I think that's where like making time for exercise, flow state, like doing all those things will help clear the system out enough at least to have more space and focus for like when I am at work. Or I guess just creating those like systems we talked about earlier, like making sure, at least trying to make sure that I'm on time, trying to make sure that I get enough sleep, like just the little things. Like I'm way more system based, I've learned. Everyone might not be like this, but even for work, like I make the same lunch every day and I make it the night before just because it's like one less thing to worry about. I don't have to worry about going and finding food. I have like a main lunch and then I bring snacks and I bring like a coconut water. Like I've learned like the exact amount of caffeine I need like here and there. And so that, I think that just comes with experimenting. And so it can be different for everyone, but that's, I guess, kind of goes back to what we talked about earlier, is like that came with a lot of trial and error, and it still might not be perfect for me yet. And so I think it's like learning to see life as a game or like a science experiment. Because in the past I was so hyper critical with myself about anything that I did wrong, like any failure. I think I'm more of like a maybe perfectionist in a way, just with sports, and it's just like, but I think if you just give yourself that space, maybe learn to like reset your expectations, that it's like, this is going to be a trial and error. There's probably times where I'm going to, not have the best day or not get enough sleep, but I'm going to try different things to figure out like what works best for me. And that's at least helped me be able to focus more fully in my job.
Yeah, it sounds like by kind of using systems to eliminate, you used the word noise earlier, like kind of eliminate some of the noise. It like seems like it frees up bandwidth for you for all the rest of it. Like if you're not deciding what to have for lunch every day, in addition to like trying to get to work on time and etc., it seems like that makes a big impact.
Yeah, I think so. Just because, kind of like what we mentioned before, it's like if you already have like kind of like the hyperactivity type of ADHD where a lot is going on in your mind, and if you don't have like the proper, like the lights working all the time, then I think just overloading the system sometimes can, you've probably experienced it, I've experienced it, can lead to like what people would call like a crash out or like a burnout, where you just get to the point where you feel like, I just need to like go into a room and like not talk to anyone. And I think that's like normal, but I think, to try to avoid that more often would be like trying to make things easier, like other things to not overload you.
Yeah.
And so like on that note, it just made me think of, I don't know if you've been like this, but I was like, and I still am, like I'm definitely not perfect, but I was such a FOMO person. Like I've gone so many nights without sleeping in my life. I love having fun, like, but like that can lead to burnout pretty easy. So I think you have to learn how to say no sometimes. And I think that goes back to what we talked about at the beginning, just learning to like, a lot of people with ADHD are always in the now, but if you can give yourself that mindfulness that we were talking about, maybe 10, 20 minutes to kind of step back, maybe plan a little bit, there might actually be a lot of things that you're saying yes to that you don't want to do, or there maybe you want to, but they're not your top priority. Like for example, if I always say yes to every fun thing and I never sleep, it's a lot more likely I'm going to burn out at work. And so I think just little things like that, learning to be like, not always, have to please everybody else. Like I feel like, do you feel like you've in the past always had to say yes and kind of like a people pleaser?
Yeah. And when you talk about this overstimulation thing, like that's been a more recent insight to realize I was like trying to be the character version of myself that doesn't have that, almost like hiding that I do get overstimulated or overwhelmed in those ways and have that internal battle. And so I might, earlier in life have really needed that, like alone time or like quiet space, no stimulation, but I couldn't necessarily like express that. And there was a big element of like, I'm kind of supposed to be this version of me instead of, I've gotten a lot better at, like you said, of saying no to things, of just also speaking for myself. Like just, I think even doing this episode with you empowers that. Like this isn't bad. It's not wrong to have ADHD. It's not wrong to like be hypersensitive. It's not like, none of these things are wrong. It's more just how do we, what can we do differently with it? And that's helped me a lot to, for example, like a friend reached out last night and I felt like this is how it sometimes will go for me, where it literally feels like my brain has ran a marathon. Like it feels like how my legs would feel if they're tired from like doing something in like something athletic. And I was proud of myself. I was like, they actually called and I had a thought to just like lie and be like, sorry, I missed it. But I'm like, I am actually just like totally overstimulated. My brain feels like this, so catch up later. And it felt pretty cool to just, it might sound silly, but to just say it like it really was.
No, that's awesome. And I think I like that. And what you said, making that more normal is totally fine, I think. I think in the world now with cell phones and like Instagram, it's just people expect like immediate responses. But we could like, even back in the day when it was just like calling someone with a house phone, if they're not home, they're not home, or kind of like it's not always, doesn't always have to be immediate. And so I think that's just like where that's good, like resetting expectations with yourself and then resetting expectations with your friends and just anyone, I think is important, because they'll respect that, especially if you're able to speak that, then they won't have to make up, some story. Because if you don't say anything, then maybe it could go both ways where they're like, oh, he's just being mean or something, when it's like, no, really, it's just like, they just need some space. And I think everyone just needs space, so we could normalize having space. That's where I'm like, the 10 to 20 minutes is like a guideline, but sometimes you might need more than that. And so, yeah, I've heard it with from Dr. Huberman before on his podcast, but like it just made me think of it with social media and even just learning in general. It's like to learn something properly, like the way he says it, you need time to like process what you've taken in. And so if you're always taking things in, like with social media, friends, if everything's always coming in, you never take any time to like process, that's going to overstimulate anyone's brain and you're going to burn out. And so I think it's just like the natural flow of like learning, doing things, but then taking time to be like, I need to reset, I need to recharge.
Yeah, that seems like really great advice for anyone with ADHD, but that just seems really applicable to everyone in our modern world. One example of the 50 tabs in our brain is when you were saying earlier something about house phones, it flashed in my mind and kind of like stayed in my mind what our house phone number was. I haven't thought about that for forever, but it's just like, it's like 944-179. And then I was still like hearing you on the other tabs, but that's like why I'm saying it, because it's just another funny example of like, there literally are like multiple tabs and that little part of me or that tab's like, well, that's cool. I haven't thought about that in a while.
No, that is cool. And I think that's how a lot of people with ADHD can be. Like one thing that's said can spark like a million different ideas. And like, that's totally awesome, because it can like just thinking a little differently than some people is awesome.
Yeah, thank you. And I was curious if you could share more of, and maybe it maybe it varies day to day, or the state you're in or the mood you're in. Good job, we both checked in on time. And then we can maybe wrap up after this question. You've mentioned a few times the 10 to 20 minutes of mindfulness or meditation, and do you do the same thing every time you do that, or like is it different things? Like what's your process like in that 10 to 20 minutes?
Yeah, so typically it's like different, but I have some that I have like brought back more and more just because I like them a lot. And so people can learn a lot of good things from your coaching program. I've done those as well. And so one of the basic ones that you've taught in there too is just learning to breathe like through your nose for 5 seconds, and then you can just breathe out for 5 seconds, or there's a variation where I like to hold for 5 seconds. So just and so even if you just did that for 10 minutes straight, that's going to turn on your parasympathetic system in your body. It's going to naturally calm down your whole body, just even from like a health science level. It's all just going to happen even without thinking. And so
it's really cool.
I think there's a lot of different types. Obviously, like meditation is like a huge, at least for me, it's like a word that can describe anything, where I just think of it as like focusing your attention on something. It doesn't have to be like your mind going to like non-thought, like Buddhist, and it can be, but typically like for me, it's not necessarily that, just like focusing on one thing.
Yeah.
So I really like Wim Hof breathing too. Like if you go to Wim Hof, just type in Wim Hof breathing on YouTube and do the beginner one. Like that one is amazing. Also EFT tapping.
We'll do a future episode on
that. We could do a future episode on that, but that one I think goes into like the self-love, because you can just do like tapping on your body. There's like the pressure points of the EFT tapping, and you can talk about like what's bothering you. So you can do it negative or positive, but I think it just gives you a space. Like if you have negative feelings, if you're not feeling good about something, it's kind of like, instead of like pushing that part of you aside and being like, I don't matter, it's kind of like giving yourself space to like say like, oh, even though I feel really terrible, for example, that I was like late to work, even though I have all this stuff set up, I still love and accept myself. And you would say like some phrase like that, and then I love and accept myself as you're tapping like the parts. There's like one on your head, above your eye, to the side, like below your nose, and it's just like these little points. And it's like super simple, but even if you just do that and like tap for like 10 minutes while you're saying something that's bothering you, like you'll notice like a difference. And so it's kind of like a mind I'm more like mind body connection. They both work together in like harmony.
Yeah.
And so that's a cool one because you can see like them working together like in real time.
Yeah, I like that idea of, connecting mind and body. And another thing that you said that stood out is just kind of paying attention to what you're paying attention to, or one thing, compared to, that is such a common phrase of just clear your mind. And I'm sure some people it must work for, because a lot of people say that, but it's been my personal experience and my experience working with others that usually that's like unhelpful advice, and that out of all the types of meditation, they all have one thing in common. There's always something you're trying to focus on. That would be like the anchor for your attention, and your mind's always going to wander, whether it's to like other self-critical thoughts or just like, what am I making for lunch tomorrow? And I think it's just similar to like going to the gym or going skiing, that repetition of like noticing your attention's wandered and coming back, whether it's tapping and more like feeling based in that moment, or your breath and your mind's wandering. I think it's helpful for people to realize that that's actually not like wrong or bad when you notice how active your mind is when you try to do different mindfulness practices. It's actually quite normal, and the point isn't to have a clear mind necessarily. It's to be able to redirect your attention, and the side effect is that you end up usually with less thoughts and a more clear mind, but not by like trying to clear your mind, more by, I'm going to focus on my breath. Like, I bet when you're doing those breathing exercises, would you say that by focusing on your breath, you end up with like less noise or less mental chatter sort of indirectly from that?
Yeah. I like what you said about the anchor thing, because it's just like, especially with the breath one, like that's why I like the Wim Hof one, or if you do one that's like a guided breathing, that one can be a little more challenging, where it's like even if your mind's going crazy, if you follow it, you're going to have to keep going back to that.
Yeah.
And so it's like the anchor. And I think, yeah, I like everything you said about it. Just, it's like normal for your mind to wander. So I would see it more as like, the way I see meditation, kind of like what you said, is more just like training, kind of like you're exercising to go to the gym.
Yeah.
You're just going to help train your mind to get more focus, like, or channeling your focus on one thing.
Yeah.
There's different types, but I guess for like the breathing, that's like kind of maybe why I like it, or is like it helps you channel your focus on one area, which will help you outside of that for other things.
Yeah, I like that, and we can make it maybe part of the tapping episode, but that just made me think about how in a meditation app I did years ago, I don't remember if I ever told you about that one because it was so long ago, but I think it was called Waking Up. That was like one of the first meditation apps that actually helped me, and like things started to click for me. But what it reminded me of is he would talk about like having I don't remember the word he used, but a more narrowed focus. Like, I'm going to try to focus on my breath. But then there were also exercises of, I'm going to try to expand and like just sort of notice everything without grabbing anything of it, and how they had different benefits. And so mainly my ADHD self just wanted to say that because that would be an interesting topic for the future too. Yeah. Of like neither good or bad, but just they have different benefits and like places, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's where they all are important, and there's like a lot of different ways to meditate. And so like I'll do those ones maybe a couple times a week, but then sometimes like if you just have nothing on, no guided, nothing, and you just want to let your mind go, I think that's also a helpful reset in a way, because it's just like learning to check in with yourself, I guess. Because if you're like super burnt out, and then it's like because some of those ones that are so focused, it's like you're just kind of, it still can take some mental energy. So I think there's benefit to both, like also just like completely just doing nothing,
Yeah.
And so the Wim Hof one, it made me think though, because during that like breathing, it's also breath holds. And so during the breath holds, you'll notice, because it's kind of hard if you try it sometimes, especially if you go to like the one that's not the beginner one. And that's where my mind will go crazy, especially during like the third one, because it's like 1 minute, 1 minute and a half, 1 minute and a half. And it's kind of cool just to see, like sometimes I won't finish, I'll have to breathe before, but sometimes I'll make it through, and it's like your body and mind are learning to work together, but my mind will be like screaming like, I need to breathe so bad right now. And I try to be like, but remember, I've done this before, I'm okay. And so I think that one is kind of cool because like you could see it in the same meditation almost of like both. You'll see your mind kind of going crazy during the breath holds, but then like during the times where you're just doing the breathing, I'll like naturally calm down. So.
Yeah, and that's a great example. I love Wim Hof breathing too, and I feel like just because it's a little different in how you breathe, it's helped me connect with my body in a different way, because like normally you breathe, like a lot of meditation has to do with breathing a lot of times, and in that one, when you have the breath hold part, it's like it's sort of so opposite that it's funny to hear your description of that. It's such a great description of like that inner world. And I like what you said about them kind of working together, like you're practicing like mind body connection, which also gets disrupted in our modern world a lot if we're not actively doing something. Like we use our mind a lot. Like I don't know about you and your work, but a lot of people in their work, it is sort of just their mind. Like you're not necessarily moving, you might be sitting at like a desk, like using your brain and not really your body. So it seems like a way that helps you kind of reconnect the two.
Yeah, exactly. Just one method. And then going back to like what we talked about earlier, like getting enough exercise, flow state activities. But then even at work, like since I do work on a computer for 8 hours a day, like I have multiple breaks throughout the day and like lunch. And so like I'm on the 4th floor of my building, so I'll always take the stairs. That's just me personally. And then I'll always like go outside during my breaks and like walk. That's cool. So I think it could be different for anyone, but just learning to like use your body physically is like super important, because I think even doing all these steps that we talked about, like if I just sat all day every day for 8 hours and didn't like utilize that time to like use my body, it's just, I think, more natural for me to be more in those like agitated states of like burnout, just because I think they both matter. And so like it's important to give them both like focus and space.
Yeah, I love what you've been able to do, like even with just the stairs, to incorporate those principles. And it's funny making our ADHD podcast. Now we're late to our next thing we're supposed to be at, but it's good. It's worth it because this was really fun. Yeah. And you have any other closing thoughts for today?
No, I think like if you guys make it this far, then I love you.
Yeah, and we'll be back for a lot more things about ADHD and more about meditation too. I like the EFT tapping thing is you've reminded me about that a lot. It's another ADHD thing where there's things that I've taught you or we've talked about in past years that then I sort of like forget about them. Mm-hmm. And recently you said something about tapping and I was like, oh yeah, like I think I might have taught you that originally and I kind of forgot that that's a thing. And that's useful. I'm gonna like try it again. I've since done it like a lot of different times and found it useful. So it's fun to remind each other too of all that we've learned over the years together, sharing Audible. And we've had like 10 million conversations like this that we said should be a podcast. And I'm also proud of us for for taking the action step, and here we are doing it.
Yeah, to actually just get started. And it's sometimes scary to get started, but I think that's obviously the first step. So just trying it, kind of like we talked about earlier, like just be willing to experiment, be willing to see it more as a game, and you don't have to finish everything at once. Like we said, this could just be one episode. Sometimes with ADHD, it's like we have to do literally everything now or else we just shouldn't do it at all. But maybe not. Maybe we should just learn to just start and then build on the momentum.
Yeah, and you've helped me with that a lot over our relationship, but even recently of just, this will be the last thought of, of just like, I do that to myself all the time where I get all these creative ideas that are in my mind instantaneous, but then like the process of them is like a lot. And then I fall into that all or nothing category of like, it either has to like all be done tomorrow or not at all. And so this specifically has been really fun because I think we both, well, it's because of your help, like we've both been able to come into it kind of in the most simple way. Like, let's not share everything we've learned about ADHD in one episode, but here's like a few basic things. And so it just feels cool that we can actively practice that principle.
Oh yeah, it's super cool.
Yeah.
Like it makes me think of skiing or snowboarding. It's like we've been doing that most of our life, and you don't think about it as much because it's fun, but that came with so much, failure and hardship along the way. But you don't see it that way because you're just seeing it as like, this is so fun, this is a game, like, and you get better, and then it's like years later, it's just you've exponentially gotten so much better. Or even like with hiking, it's just, it depends on what you love. But I'm like, going up a mountain, like some people would be like, this is the most worst thing ever, but I'm like, I've learned to see that pain as like, I actually have just learned to like expect it, and I like it. And so it's just like learning to update your expectations, like, and that's why I kind of like to see it as a game or a sport. Kind of like sports are so cool for me to learn from, because there's like a lot of pain in sports, but you just don't see it the same as we see real life stuff usually.
Yeah, I love the idea of like making it a game, and it's a good place to end. And
Sounds good, man.
Sweet.